back on its feet. So when will we see the economy turn around? That's the ultimate question. And how will the stimulus help us close to home? Congressman Joe Sestak represents Pennsylvania's 7th District. He's our guest this morning, and we're just delighted to have you with us, Congressman.
Thanks, Pat. Good to be back.
I know I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball, but do you feel that this economic stimulus package that has now been signed by the president is really the absolute right way to go, and is it going to make the biggest difference in what period of time?
This bill is actually a bit small, in my opinion, but it's the right step. And here's how it should work. I expect by the second half of 2009 to see consumers begin to spend more money, helping us get that part of the market going again, because you'll see a very immediate impact of the $400 in tax rebates, the money that's going into the increase in food stamps, the unemployment insurance, and the aid to the state as they give money out. That's going to happen in the second half. Because of that, what you're going to see is, instead of having an unemployment rate of about 12 or 13% in December, it'll be about 9.5 to 10%. We're going to slow it down, stop the hemorrhaging of the jobs. By the way, 11% marks the official beginning of a depression. Then what you're going to see in the 2010 is the construction money we have in there. And there's a big bite of that infrastructure money in there, begin to help the labor market. And so you'll see the economy begin then to slowly begin to get back on its feet. I expect to see us beginning to come out of this recession to about the level we were of gross domestic product in 2007, about the end of 2010. But very critical is that's only one of 4 needed pillars to get this economy booming again.
Well, before we get to the other pillars, what we've also seen this week, though, is that the stimulus bill gets signed and the market tanks. Yes. And there are so many people who have their savings in the stock market. So how do you reconcile that?
Absolutely. And that's why the second rail of these 4 rails is needed. What the markets primarily are focused upon are we cleaning up the mother milk of our economy, that is lending and credit, which became frozen in the fall. In fact, as you probably well know, that first week in October, not one bond, the first time in the history of America, not one bond was issued in America. So what they're waiting to see is if our Treasury Secretary, who I think dashed their expectations a bit with his announcement a week and a half ago, comes forward with a much more bold intervention into our credit markets called the TARP money. If we are able to take the $350 billion remaining and begin to soak up to purchase the toxic mortgage securities that the banks don't know how valuable they are, but we're Americans, Pat. We can make a market on anything. Go on eBay. You can find an old Kennedy campaign pin and begin to make a market. Once the government intervenes, begins to purchase these, then all of a sudden it attracts private investment in. And you begin to get a market going again, and then you know the value of a bank that has a lot of these on the book. That second rail, getting the TARP money going again, in conjunction with the Federal Reserve that's already obligated $3.8 trillion into credit areas, is what makes the markets begin to say, let's start financing going again.
But Congressman, what about the oversight, though, in terms of getting the banks to actually lend the money? It appears that up to this point, as we are seeing Americans save more money, we also see different entities that are getting money from the federal government holding it. They're not putting it back into the system, which has everything then paralyzed.
Very good point. That's why in the economic stimulus bill, there was a provision that applied to banks when they get money in the TARP that said there's going to be a prenuptial agreement from now on, extending all the way back to October 3rd when the first bank got it, the money, that there's going to be a legal agreement that if you get this money, X amount will go into lending. However, I have to also say the reason the banks did this is because Congress failed on that September vote for what was called the bailout bill to pass it the first day. And when it did,
to have the oversight the first day to make it really clear.
Actually pass the bill, the first $700 billion. When it failed that first day, the market fell almost 9% and continued to come down. Every bank must hold $1 back for $10 in loans. When the markets plummeted because of the failure to vote for that first bill, the dollar they were holding went to 50 cents, and they were about to reach out and take $5 away out of lending. So Mr. Paulson put almost all the money into the banks to build that dollar back up again, because the banks by law must have so much on the books. So it was partly Congress's fault for not passing it initially. But now that we've steadied out, primarily because the Federal Reserve has actually been doing what we should have done on Congress, keeping the lending going, upwards, as I mentioned, of $3.8 trillion. Now we can go out and actually begin to purchase these tax securities and get the lending going again, because the prenuptial agreement will demand that they do the lending.
Okay, so we also then have this week the foreclosure bill, the $75 billion foreclosure bill. That the president is very hopeful that it will somehow restore home values. It will kind of stop the bleeding and then help to restore home values over a period of time. What's your level of confidence in that?
I think that this is the third rail. I am confident that this is a very good bill. I still feel it's not enough. The reason this is a good bill is banks don't know how to value their portfolio, because they have a lot of mortgages, as a lot of housing prices continue to plummet, and you continue to get, as we have had already, 3 million foreclosures occur. So we have to stop that falling rate of housing prices leading to more foreclosures. So what this bill does is it actually lets people refinance, even if up to 5 million if they're what is called underwater. The mortgage is more than the value of the house. Fannie and Freddie, now owned by the government, will let them, if they have good credit and been paying their bills, refinance at a better rate. We're also going to take the other ones.
And excuse me, and they'll refinance at a better rate and maybe save $400 or $500 a month. And I guess for a family that needs that $400 or $500 a month, that's really an important number. However, if they don't have a job, because across industries, we're talking about across industries, tens of thousands of jobs have been lost. I mean, how do you reconcile that within the Congress?
That's why no one of these four rails, the fourth one being the Federal Reserve, can be done in isolation. We must, in this economic stimulus bill, people say it was for the stimulation of our economy. I disagree. It was primarily to stop the hemorrhaging of jobs. Crozier Hospital System, as of 2 days ago, was laying off upwards of 400 people. Why? Because Governor Rendell is unable to pay his share of the Medicaid cost for the patients that come in, and Crozier doesn't have the revenues to pay for it. So we gave $90 billion to Governor Rendell and the other governors to pay that so Crozier doesn't lay off people. So the economic stimulus bill was primarily to stop the hemorrhaging of jobs. Then we get the credit going again where job creation occurs. At the same time, simultaneously, we've got to get the housing industry done. And I give you that $400 for many families may not be enough, particularly as you're laid off. Because the more important issue is this. We have found that even though we've modified the loans of a lot of people so far, 60% of them go back into default. Because even though we're lowering the interest rate or extending the time they can pay, that a little bit amount of money isn't enough. What we really need to do, which is something people don't want to do who do pay their mortgages, and this is understandable, it's called moral hazard, they don't want to see them forgive the loan. A principle. Until we begin to hold on tightly to a third rail of politics and say, wait a moment, it's no longer just about your neighbor who we're going to help bail out. It's the common good, because every foreclosed property on your street, the price of your home goes down 9%. And so we must begin to forgive the principle and have people stay in their house at an affordable rate so you don't have vacancies occurring. Then there's no tax basis for schools.
You know, Congressman, quickly, before we wrap up, this is a very complicated thing. Are we finding that really our American way of life, what we have felt like have been a very rich country, and our American way of life and the way that we've been doing things is just not going to come back?
It's going to come back, and I'm convinced for two reasons. It's going to come back booming. First, look at the Great Depression. There they did nothing, the U.S. government, between Black Monday, 1929, when the market fell, to 1933, and unemployment went up to 27%. Then the government did what we're now doing, intervening, and brought it back down in 4 years to 9.5% unemployment from 27%. And then, yes, the war happened, but look what happened in the 50s and 60s. I'm convinced we did it once, we'll do it second, for a second reason, which is, I think government is beginning to gain, if it continues to work together as the president is trying to do.